About 50 years before old John Purdue came to Indiana from Ohio, American troops fought the Kickapoo Indians in the Battle of Tippecanoe. Their victory won the land that became West Lafayette and made it possible to form Purdue University in 1869. 100 years later, Purdue was yet again the site of a major battle of ideals. A small group of determined students banded together to demand change, armed with bricks alone, not to break, but to build. Speaking truth to power, they changed the course of history and rebuilt the foundations of Purdue, one brick at a time. This is their story. If you've ever been the only one of your kind, maybe it was your gender, from where you came, or your race, that gave you the painful feeling of isolation, the Black Purdue experience grows out of that feeling. And so it goes that in the beginning, there was only one. In the early years at Purdue, being black meant that you were among the first, the few, or the forgotten. 2 decades later, with the attack on Pearl Harbor, the nation called, and blacks answered.
Wave after wave of enemy planes bombed American aircraft and units of the Pacific Fleet in a treacherous attack which achieved perfect tactical surprise.
The War Department, in order to satisfy the increasing demand for officers, created the elite Navy V-12 program on 131 U.S. college campuses. Blacks entered the military in record numbers. Purdue's West Lafayette campus, chosen for its superior engineering and technical curriculum, soon became training grounds for officers. Even though newly enlisted blacks were overwhelmingly restricted to low-ranking positions, there was soon an exception. Frederick Branch became the first African-American officer in the United States Marine Corps in 1945. But while the Navy V-12 program brought minor racial progress, it also brought painful contradictions. While black soldiers lived in newly built military barracks on the campus at Purdue, no black student was allowed dormitory housing.
When I arrived at Purdue in 1942, I went through the registration line, and one of the first persons I saw was a counselor. He took one look at me and said, "You don't belong at Purdue. You're not college material." Being black at Purdue, we were just on the edge of everything. We weren't involved in any of the student organizations. The atmosphere was completely different then. We could not live in West Lafayette, but two white clergymen set up an international house.
For black male students, the only place on campus to sleep was the International House, a small home reserved for students from foreign countries and Negroes. Residents hailed from as far away as Czechoslovakia, Korea, Indonesia, China, Uruguay, and Gary, Indiana. For black female students, the only housing was miles away, accessible by foot in the most undesirable parts of West Lafayette.
My sister and I came to Purdue in 1946, and we could not live on the campus.
Frida's father, Fred Parker, sent a letter to President Hovde seeking on-campus housing for his daughters. Hovde denied their admission to the dormitory. Disheartened, Mr. Parker then sought out Fabrin de France, secretary of the colored branch of the Senate Avenue YMCA in Indianapolis, and a black power broker. On behalf of the Parker girls, he assembled a motley crew of concerned citizens to pay a visit to an old friend, Indiana Governor Ralph Gates, who in turn pressured Purdue.
We received a letter from the Dean of Women who did everything she could to discourage us from coming and living on the campus, short of telling us how unhappy we would be and how the people wouldn't speak to us and, the same old thing all the time. We didn't believe her anyway. So we were admitted to the dormitory.
The spring semester of 1947 marked the end of housing discrimination at Purdue. Along with the 4 newest colored residents of Bunker Hill were the Parker girls.
The Student Union building had a barber shop, but they would not cut Negro students' hair there. So the late Judge A. Aloysius Higginbotham and I went to the president, and we protested to him that we wanted to get our haircuts in West Lafayette.
In order to get a haircut, black male students would drive an hour south of Purdue in order to find a local colored barbershop in Indianapolis.
And he listened to us very patiently. Then he said, "Well, we'll put a pair of hair clippers in the Service and Stores building, and you can check them out and cut your hair." So that was such a slap in the face that Leon Higginbotham, who became a federal judge, a legal scholar, went on to Oberlin to finish his education.
While the minor gains of prior years were a source of pride to many, for future generations of black Purdue students, they were barely enough. With a new generation came a whole new mindset. A new Negro was coming to Purdue.
The new Negro is a person with a new sense of dignity and destiny, with a new self-respect. Along with that is this lack of fear which once characterized the Negro, this willingness to stand up courageously.
Gradual racial progress now gave way to frustration and discontentment. Social unrest was in the air. The nation was at war. The civil rights movement was in full throttle. The boiler was soon to erupt.
When I came to Purdue in the fall of 1965, it was a very large campus, lots of red brick buildings, lots of white people, and finally saw some black folks, and that was like very exciting because there were very few of us. I was told, I believe in 1965, the total population on the school was 18,000, and of that, supposedly 100 black students, and of that, supposedly 20 black females. I never knew more than 10 black females. And there probably were 100 students. Most of them were that were black were either athletes or engineering students or pharmacy majors, and some science majors.
Well, I came to Purdue University as a student in 1966. The climate was one of ultra-conservatism. There were many challenges for African Americans coming to this institution. The biggest challenge was there were very few people who looked like you here. It was a big university at that time. It was probably in the neighborhood of 20,000. But when you looked around, you didn't see very many people like you. Most of the students who were here who were like me were athletes like myself. Many of them were on the football team. But as time went on, we began to realize it was important for us to overcome the battle. And from the standpoint of overcoming the obstacles that we had to face, and there were many things that we couldn't do in this campus, on this campus, in this community, that other people did without any problem whatsoever.
The thing I think that's probably difficult for people to understand now about the 60s is how rapidly things were changing, even at Purdue. And I say even at Purdue because Purdue was a very traditional and very conservative school. I mean, when I got there, you know, what you noticed was the football team, the world's largest drum, the cheerleaders, the fraternities and sororities, the engineering students carrying their slide rules on their belts. That's, you know, a technological generation ago. But it was very traditional. And by 1968 and 69, I mean, there were days when you might have thought you were at Berkeley or Madison, Wisconsin, to see the demonstrations that were taking place.
You know, there was a Vietnam War going on, and the news was constantly reporting all those casualties, and then all of a sudden it began to report the unrest by the population, particularly younger people, folks who started to call themselves hippies, other universities that started to have demonstrations, some violent, some nonviolent. Purdue was probably one of the last campuses to show any level of unrest by any student.
Visiting speakers on campus were electrifying and thought-provoking. Jesse Jackson, Dick Gregory, and the Indianapolis chapter of the Black Panther Party were among them. Black students at Purdue were reading and listening to messages of protest. They organized the Negro History Study Group, which eventually became the Black Student Union, to discuss growing frustrations.
We'd had a number of meetings in Stewart Center to discuss demands that we had as black students. About that time was when we started to be calling ourselves black as opposed to Negro, and we weren't tolerating that.
One of the things that came out of that was an attitude of those black students that we've been ignored. We haven't been provided with the kind of resources that the general student body has been provided with, and we think we ought to be recognized.
Just 1 month after the assassination of Dr. King, the students emerged with their own nonviolent plan. Advised by Marine veteran Bob Jones and 2 visionary leaders, sophomore Homer LaRue and junior Linda Jo Mitchell. It was an overcast May morning in 1968. 129 students armed with a list of 9 demands assembled at the steps of the administration building.
Day of the march, we had already been told that we needed to get a brown paper bag and find a red brick. Purdue was a red brick buildings everywhere. So we each got our brick, put it in our little paper bag. We assembled in Stewart Center, and we got in a single line.
Each of us went to a brickyard and got a brick. There was actually a construction project going on campus, so it made it convenient for us. But we all picked up a brick. We marched from the Union Building, the normal center of student activity, in a straight line. No one said a word.
With our red bricks in our brown paper bags, one by one, to Hovde Hall, which is the main administration building where the president and other higher level officers had offices. And single file, quietly, and many people with black sunglasses on, you know, that was real cool back then, walked single file, quietly to Hovde Hall, and one by one, we took our red bricks out of our brown paper bags, and one by one, we walked up the steps and put a brick on the steps.
And on the first level platform, we laid a pile of bricks right down in front of the building. It was an amazing experience because as we looked into the windows, there were people in all of the windows watching this student group march on the administration building.
I remember the demonstration as being very moving. It was very well organized. The students were quiet, they were dignified. Well, the two organizers of the demonstration, Linda Jo Mitchell and Homer LaRue, knew me and sort of knew where I stood. And by this time, they knew that the Exponent was sort of a real student newspaper, not just the public relations organ that the university wanted us to be. So they gave us a heads up that this demonstration would take place so that we would make sure we had a reporter there, a photographer there. They put this sign on the steps of the administration building. They filed by one at a time and carefully laid their bricks at the base of the sign. And it was a very powerful demonstration. I can remember that, you looked up at the administration building and there were heads peeping out the windows from behind the curtains. And I think there was a certain amount of fear on the part of the people in the administration building about, what was maybe going to happen next.
So we laid the bricks down in front of the administration building on the stairs. We placed a sign in it. The sign said, "The fire next time."
One year after the protest, on March 20th of 1969, the student newspaper, the Purdue Exponent, published a 6-page black supplement. Inside, there was a full-page investigation into the progress made on the black student demands presented the previous year. The article was entitled, "The Demands and the Answers." The integration of history courses resulted in a single class taught by a white professor who had a hard time saying the word Negro. On the integration of student organizations, the article stated, blacks remained conspicuously absent. On the inclusion of black arts, the music department had only entertained the idea of a jazz course. No list on discriminatory housing was ever produced, and the course taught by Linda Jo Mitchell was discontinued. Regretfully, after 1 year, very little had actually changed. By the 60s, Purdue had begun to recruit black athletes like All-American Leroy Keys and trackman Eric McCaskill.
As an athlete, you were somewhat in a little special category, looked up to in a certain way, especially if you were a star athlete. But the extent of other things in terms of social and otherwise, that I was total different story. Our freshman year, 65, the count was 100 brothers, or was it? I know it was 120 total, and the sisters were very, very, very slim. I mean, in terms of numbers. In terms of numbers. And so that meant that if you were a freshman brother, you were just out of it, because the ladies looked at the upperclassmen and forget, quote unquote, talking to white girls back then. That was an unwritten rule that you keep, especially if you're an athlete coming from the South, you keep your nose clean, you play whatever sport you do, and you'll be all right.
Well, life as an athlete was life that I would say was enjoyable from the standpoint that physical activity can take away frustration. Everybody has frustrations, and the frustrations that we had to deal with and build up with during the course of the day or in the evening after practice kind of dissipated when you were a student athlete, because you had that opportunity to physically get it out of your system. Also, the fact that we were individuals who the community admired from the standpoint that we were doing something positive for their teams, made it an easier place for an athlete to be versus an individual who is a black and only a student.
The black athlete at Purdue became vital to the student movement, lending their local celebrity to the cause, often raising the profile of student protests. Black athletes were historically among the first to break racial barriers at Purdue. Herman Murray, the first black Boilermaker on the gridiron. Ernie Hall in the same year changed life on the hardwood in Boilermaker basketball forever. Lamar Lundy, who in 1957 became the only Boilermaker to win both MVP of the football and basketball teams in the same year. One of Purdue's first black cheerleaders, Pam King, drew more jeers than cheers with her afro and clenched fist. Even All-American Leroy Keys found his bravery challenged both on and off the field. Leroy played and protested, much like his high school rival Eric McCaskill, who was soon to learn the high cost of taking on the stringent grooming policy of Purdue athletics.
This was my senior year, and I had gotten injured, and so I wasn't, a value, so at least in my mind, because if you couldn't run, what was your value? And I was concerned whether or not I would still have my scholarship. But there were 7 of us on the team, and we decided that if we wanted to wear a mustache, we could, because from our culture, that was just a statement. That was just something that African-American men did. So we got together and said, look, we're gonna make a stand, and we're not gonna shave our mustaches.
Purdue's track team had a long-standing uniform policy requiring runners to remain clean-shaven. But within Purdue's turbulent climate and an evolving racial identity, black runners decided to stand up and put the razors down.
In our thinking, this was in the spring of '69, so the '68 Olympics had already happened, and when we saw Carlos and Tommy Smith do the black fist thing, and we looked up to these guys, because, they were the bomb, as the kids say. And when they made that stand, we said, wow, man, they stood up against the establishment, man, an American national anthem. And it just affected our psyche. And then back in April of '68, we were running at the Kentucky Relays at the University of Kentucky. And that's when we heard that Dr. King was assassinated. And man, we started crying. I'm just going back and playing that over in my mind now. And it just hit us that, man, this guy was a peaceful dude, peaceful man. And somebody killed him. So we felt like we had to make a stand, that we weren't going to do, quote unquote, the white man's thing any longer. We were going to do what we were required, but we were going to do what we culturally knew was our identity, So it was building up. All that was going on during that time, it was building up. So when we showed up at the airport, 3 didn't shave and 4 did. And the assistant coach says, you guys, y'all can't go. I said, what you mean we can't go? And he said, you don't shave your mustaches. I was injured anyway, so I was mainly there in support of Jimmy and Mel. And when he said that, I said, look, man, I'm a senior, man, but these guys are junior, man. They need to, and they said, no, they're not going. And I said, man, if I had a bomb there, I'd blow the plane up. And the next thing I knew, the FBI was on the scene. And I was definitely terrified because I didn't know what they were going to do. They could have done anything. You know, they could have trumped the charges up. They could have arrested me. They could have done anything. After interrogating me, I found that, okay, this is, you know, a young guy. It was you know, ill-advised statement, and he's not a terrorist. And so I was released from that. Shortly thereafter, the state police, 2 officers come up, and they arrest me for disorderly conduct. When I was arrested and the news hit the students, I was set for a court appearance. It was a rallying point because prior to that, you know, the silent protest, and there was like a lull.
The arrest of 22-year-old Eric McCaskill galvanized the black student body like never before. With the help of Purdue's first black professor, Helen Bass Williams, the students organized a march into the town of Lafayette.
Court appearance was that Monday. We organized, met at the student union, about 100 students, and we marched from the student union across the Wabash River, Wabash Bridge to Lafayette, from West Lafayette to Lafayette. When I got to the courtroom coming up the stair, I still remember it. I mean, you had a guy from CBS affiliate in Indianapolis and interviewed me. And I said, I'm calling in a lawyer because it's a trumped up charge. And so I was getting into nation time. And we go make our way into the courtroom, and it's jam-packed. They'd never seen that many black folk in one, in that courtroom. The district attorney questioned me, and he recommended to the judge that the case be thrown. There's not enough evidence. And so it was dismissed, and after that we just shouted.
As the march continued back to campus, the focus quickly turned to the administration building. This time, students went beyond the building steps, and silence was replaced with urgency and passion.
And as we were going up to the steps of the administration building and into the main lobby, this is what we're singing. And we asked, said, we're here to see President Hovde. And as we went up to his office, there was, secretary was caught off guard because she didn't know what we were going to do. And I said, we're here to see President Hovde. And she said, well, he's not here. I said, well, we want to talk to him. We need to talk to President Hovde. And she saw that we meant business. And she got him on the phone. I said, President Hovde, this is Eric again. So there was previous communication. And we're here to say that there's certain demands that have not been fulfilled. And I made it clear to President Hovde that this had nothing to do with the athletic incident. I said, this is new business. This is the business that we talked about, that had begun years, a year later, with the 9 demands, plus a place where we can gather as African American students.
This time, President Hovde got the message. There was no delay in action. He appointed a special committee to look into black student problems right away. In a fateful move, the student committee headed by Eric McCaskill made one small change to their requests. They wanted a special place as a permanent part of campus life.
Damn, I wish it was somewhere I could go and rap with some brothers and sisters.
A black cultural center should be a place where black culture is made both visible and viable.
On June 6, 1969, the Board of Trustees unanimously accepted the development program for black students, a 5-year initiative, and the fall of the 1970 semester saw the opening of the Black Cultural Center. There was now a home within a home for black students. It was also a repository of black culture for the larger Purdue community, and soon became fertile ground for the development and support of programs and organizations that would enrich campus life for decades to come.
And the Black House, the Black Cultural Center, commonly known as the Black House, was kind of a place of refuge. It was a place where you really got a taste of home. And I really hadn't been big on history. And there were a lot of historical artifacts, a lot of books and magazines about Black history. It was a whole environment of Malcolm and Martin and Muhammad and all of those, and it was encouraging and nourished there. Tony Zamora was the head of the executive director of the Black House at that time, and he was very personable, into jazz music, just a real cool brother. So I related to him very well. Stark contrast to the academic side. So during the morning, you go to class and you get beat up in Physics 151 or 152, run by the Black House to get kind of a break, to kind of recharge, and then jump back in there so you could hit chemistry 230 or 240.
Boy, I mean, to actually see what our vision was to come into fruition was awesome, because here, you were 20, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old students, but to see this house come about was awesome. Hallelujah! Thank God we shall overcome. We started singing.
On the other side of campus, Dean John Day was also working to create opportunities for Black students in the Krannert School of Management with BOP, the Business Opportunities Program. His most valuable recruit came in 1970, a high school principal from Gary, Indiana, Dr. Cornell Bell. Over the next 3 decades, Dr. Bell recruited, mentored, and advised over 800 students through the Business Opportunities Program. He was a special man with the gift to inspire.
In the 70s at Purdue, we were right after 1968, which was a very difficult year. And for African Americans, Dr. King was killed, Bobby Kennedy was killed, Tommy Smith and John Carlos did their salute at the Olympics. So everybody was conscious of race as we moved out of the late 60s into the early 70s. The Krannert School of Business at Purdue started a program to lure and entice young African Americans to go into business. My company is composed of 19 McDonald's restaurants. I have 750 employees, and we have gross sales of plus $40 million, approaching $50 million. And so if I look at the background that I picked up from Krannert, it was the analytical skills to look at the P&Ls and really understand the infrastructure of the business model from a quantitative basis. So it's great to be associated with this world-class, elite academic institution.
In 1974, the engineering department gave birth to the Minority Engineering Program and appointed an enterprising young Purdue alumna to head the program, Marion Blaylock.
As coordinator of minority engineering programs, there were some things that were already in place. They were a result of the march that we'd done in 1968, and they had begun to develop. So we were experimenting with various programs. We did some outreach programs where we went to the students where they were, and we had some on-site campus visits where we would bring the students to us, and they would spend a week or 2 or 3 days on campus, get to meet other Black students.
Over the next 35 years, Marion would be responsible for graduating over 2,000 students through the Minority Engineering Program. However, in 1974, the department had not yet seen the likes of an ambitious, young, street-smart kid from Chicago named Tony.
Engineering department, being Black in the School of Engineering was, again, very, very challenging. In high school, I'd always been very good in math, did real well on the SATs and the ACTs. I was very confident in my ability to perform in class. I could kind of charm my way through and not really have to work that hard. When I got to Purdue, though, it was a very different environment. My academic advisor there suggested that since we hadn't had calculus wasn't offered in our inner city high school, and most of the engineering students had calculus already, they suggested, well, maybe you should take a remedial math curriculum, and if you did that, you had to take a remedial physics and chemistry curriculum because they came as a package. But I wasn't having it. I'm taking regular math no matter what. Well, if you do that, you got to take regular physics, regular chemistry. So be it. So I remember the first day of Calculus 161, we get in class and a couple of other students that had gone to West Lafayette High School said, "Hey, Billy, look, it's the same textbook that we had in high school." And I'm thinking, uh-oh, trouble here. And I kind of began to understand what they were talking about in terms of preparedness. But Ed Barnett and other black students in engineering there knew this was going to be an issue for us, so they invited us to their study sessions and encouraged us and really helped tutor us. So one of the advantages that I had and that my group had is that several of us were from Chicago. In fact, 5 of us were from the same high school. And we were the cool guys on campus. We even carried little business cards that said, "We soothe, we charm, we satisfy." We had a top hat, cane, and gloves on it, and we all had nicknames. I was known as Tony Rome because I wore this stingy brim Dobbs hat that Frank Sinatra had worn in his movie Tony Rome. Anyway, side story. But we all had that Chicago look. We wore the silk and wool pants and the black sweaters, and we all we danced. We bopped, which is now called a step, but we bopped, and we were really good at it. And when we would go out to a party, we made a presence. We were pretty generally recognized as being different from the other students on campus.
Anthony Harris was one of a group called the Chicago Six. And the Chicago Six consisted of Anthony Harris, Ed Coleman, Brian Harris, John Logan, Stan Kirtley, and George Smith. They were all from the Chicago area. Most of them, I believe, went to Lindblom High School. Tony was sort of the head guy of the group. He was a pusher, mover, shaker. Tony, when he graduated from Purdue in '75, went on to Harvard Business School. So you can sort of get a feel for the kind of man Tony was.
My experience with the American Society of Mechanical Engineers gave me an opportunity to travel to different campuses, to go to professional conferences, even had an opportunity to go to the National Convention in New York City, and kind of had a chance to meet other black students from other universities that were at these meetings and kind of talk about, wouldn't this be great if there was more African-American participation? When I went back then to the Black Society of Engineers, I kind of brought these ideas with me and pitched them to my roommates. Wouldn't it be something if our organization was more global, more international, and had more reach and more scale and more scope? There was a lot of consciousness in the air. There was the voices of Malcolm and Martin were there, and there was a lot of student protests that we'd heard about prior to our arrival. And I think I was becoming conscious, as opposed to it being all about me and all about us with our little group. It became all about us with the capital U, a bigger group. We saw that there weren't very many black students matriculating, that the black students that were there weren't graduating, that there was no black faculty, and that blacks that once they graduated, some were struggling getting jobs. And as I traveled around with the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, this story was the same all over the country. And I thought, we really could do something about this if we could structure this thing and organize it. And the American Society of Mechanical Engineers was a great template. So I pitched it, and it sold.
With the help of President Hanson, the Purdue NSBE chapter prepared to host representatives from 80 colleges and universities. Tony and his 6 friends from Chicago desperately wanted to create a national engineering organization.
They got with President Hanson here at Purdue. Dr. Hanson wrote a letter out to the presidents of many universities across the country and encouraged them to allow someone from their school to come to Purdue and discuss the idea for a national body. And it was that invitation that attracted students from all over the country, as far away as Canada, to come to Purdue. I believe it was April 12th, 1975. And they met here. I believe they met in Stewart Center. I was here at the time. The Purdue chapter was the host chapter. And at the end of that meeting, we left with a national body defined that we called the National Society of Black Engineers.
So let's see, when I graduated from Purdue in 1975, I went and pursued my MBA and kind of went away from the organization for a while and then came back in an advisory capacity around 1980-81. Since that time, the organization has truly blossomed. It currently has 33,000 members in 19 countries worldwide. We have a full-time paid professional staff of 25 employees. We own a 19,000 square foot building in Alexandria, Virginia. The organization has a $15 million annual budget. I mean, this is the largest student-run organization in the world and the most impactful organization of its type anywhere.
In 1980, the Black Cultural Center celebrated its 10th year anniversary and hosted its first Black alumni dinner. This event set the stage for Black Purdue to mature beyond the student experience into the ranks of Purdue's prestigious alumni.
A Purdue degree means a lot of different things, and it actually starts before you graduate. And the first part of it really has to do with how you are recruited. So when you come out of Purdue, there are name brand companies that want you because of the educational expertise that you have and because of what they know that you're going to be able to deliver coming out of a Purdue education. So I had a chance to talk to companies in California. There were companies East Coast, West Coast. I talked to global companies coming out. The second part of education from Purdue was based upon the experience and the toughness you had to have to make it through the curriculum. What we really learned was how to think. You learned how to work through problems. And no matter where you go, no matter what you do, you're gonna have to work through problems. So, you know, the Purdue education for me, married with how I grew up and a common sense approach to dealing with life, those two things together, I felt that I was ready to handle anything that was thrown at me.
Okay. When I graduated in '76 and actually had 2 degrees, a bachelor's and a master's, and I headed south, I really didn't realize the impact of Purdue, how a great institution that it was. When I hit the corporate office, many people thought that it was an Ivy League school. And when I talked to my relatives, I started in Memphis, Tennessee, they really thought it was a Ivy League East Coast school. And the further I moved from Lafayette, I began to realize the first man to walk on the moon, Neil Armstrong, was a Purdue graduate. The last man to walk on the moon, Alan Cerner, is a Purdue graduate. They boast about 7 or 8 astronauts. So again, I didn't realize the impact of this institution and how elite an institution it was until I moved away.
People say, well, you know, electrical engineering, so how did you use that to do this or that? Electrical engineering is just about how pieces fit together, how things flow together, how you address issues that you might have, and you have to break problems down in small chunks. And that is no different than what the CEO of the largest corporation in the world does. So for me today, as the president of McDonald's US, if I have human resource initiatives or issues or pipeline development, it's a small chunk. If I'm looking at how to market to Latinos or market to Asians in America in a very different and a novel way, it's a small chunk. If I'm looking at media buys and whether or not the media market may be soft now, or a negotiation I might have with the commissioner of the NBA, it's all small chunks. And so for me, that part of my education, I use each and every moment of the day. You know, the most important thing that I took away from Purdue is very easy. You know, I'll tell you, I took away a lot of things. You know, I took away great education. I took away the ability, as I mentioned, to think and problem solve. You know, I took away, I have some fantastic friendships that were created there. But the most important thing, you know, by far, was the fact that that's where I met my wife. And so, you know, now it's 28 plus years later. She's still the sweet little girl that I met in that first calculus class.
Don and I first met on the first night of campus at Purdue. We hadn't even started classes yet, and we had both been invited to a scholarship dinner. And so I said, well, you know, I'm Liz. We met first night of school. You know, oh yeah, I remember you. You know, I said, so where are you from? And he said, I'm from Chicago. I said, I'm from Chicago. I said, what part of Chicago? He said, north side of Chicago. And I said, you know, it's not a lot of black folks from the north side of Chicago. Where did you grow up? He said, it's a little street. You won't know anything about it. And I said, what street? He said, Cleveland Street. And I said, Cleveland?
She said, I grew up on Cleveland Street.
I grew up on Cleveland Street. I said, what was your address? And he said,
1342. And she said,
952 North Cleveland. We grew up 4 blocks apart.
And never knew each other.
And had never met. And so we started talking about other things. We had both taken 4 years of Latin in high school. We were both interested in astronomy. And we just kept talking. And I'm like, okay, there's something happening here.
We're blessed. Simply put, we are blessed. And I say that because to whom much is given, much is required. So we don't really have a choice but to give back. And when it comes to students and sponsoring students, you know, someone somewhere sponsored us. You know, neither of us had the money to be at Purdue. Grants came from organizations and from people who were basically given the same level of support that we are attempting to give today. The other thing is we want to be a beacon to people just to know you can make it through. You can make it through Purdue, you can graduate, you can have a viable career, a viable life. You can be anything you want to be, whenever you decide you want to be. It's up to you.
1990 was the first year Purdue students elected an African American as president of the student government. Taurus Richardson from Bellwood, Illinois, helped organize a Hands Across Campus rally that saw students from a variety of backgrounds join hands and encircle the fountain, followed by the quick run through the water.
Purdue's a very big school. I mean, 36,000 students can be daunting. And so for me, I was a joiner. When I first got to campus at Cary Quad, where I lived, they had elections. And so first thing I did was I ran for treasurer of Cary Quad. They had a bicycle club. I was like, that sounds cool. I joined Jahari. I joined the science club, because at the time I was thinking about doing some stuff with science. Joining the Society of Minority Managers. I joined Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. I just wanted to join stuff. And then towards the end of my junior year, I had an opportunity to sort of think about either joining Purdue's Board of Trustees and or running for student government president. And there had never been sort of a black student who wanted to or aspired to be sort of the student body president, and that intrigued me. And given that there was only 1,000 black students on campus, it quite frankly felt like a mandate from the campus to sort of win that election. That was special. And more importantly than that, we really think we had an impact on the campus after the election. Post-Purdue, I had the opportunity to go work at Solomon Brothers in the merger group. I had the opportunity to go work in Africa, where I started an investment bank with some fellow people from Solomon Brothers. And then after Harvard Business School, I got the ability to go work in finance, where you get to buy companies and own them and improve them. I'd say the most important thing I got from Purdue was basically friendships, and quite frankly, lifelong friendships with people who are sort of my deep personal friends, as well as sort of my mentors and network from which I get advice and inspiration to sort of push harder and work harder to try to be successful. And so for the last 10 years, we have built a minority-owned company focused on buying and selling companies. And some of the things we own include a business called Spirit Cruises, which is the owner of the Odyssey boat that we're on here, that we're having a Purdue Business and Leadership Summit on.
The Purdue Black Alumni Organization created the annual Business and Leadership Summit in 2007 as a way to promote networking among Black alumni. Each year, 10 scholarships and invitations are made available to the next generation of Boilermakers through the Business Opportunities Program. One such recipient is Heather Parchman.
I chose Purdue because, as soon as I came on the campus, I looked at like 4 or 5 different Big Ten schools, and as soon as I came on the campus, I stepped off the bus and I was like, this is my school. Another reason why I chose Purdue is because they had the Business Opportunity Program, which got me that connection with the Black community. The Purdue family gave me some help through actually the semester. I couldn't afford to continue this semester. Sad. So they sent me a letter and they said, they gave me a deadline. If you don't have your money in by this date, your classes will be canceled. My heart really just dropped. And, I talked to my mom and I was like, I don't know what to do. She didn't have the financial means to do it. I talked to my advisor over Director of Diversity Initiatives, and, he was like, okay, I'm going to email, the Bott family. And emailed them, called them up, and was like, this young lady, outstanding young lady needs help. So they, dropped like $500 here, $750 here, $100 here, and, all told, accumulated to almost $6,000, and just enough for me to, continue with this semester. So, I think without the Business Opportunity Program, I probably would not be here right now.
In 1998, Mamon Powers Jr., one of the student protesters of the 1968 march, who had since become Purdue's second African-American trustee, returned, along with his brother Claude, to give over $100,000 towards the construction of a new $3 million Black Cultural Center facility.
We do educational tours here at the Black Cultural Center, and part of the educational tours is to talk about the architectural elements of the facility, because we were very deliberate in the design of the facility. This is the first building on the university campus that was designed by an African-American architect, and we highlight some of those architectural elements. One of the most striking is the portal, which is the entranceway to the Black Cultural Center. It creates or sends a message that Purdue University is an inclusive community, and that portal is representative of leading into the Black community here at Purdue University. Our receptionist desk has a very unique shape to it. It's actually inspired by the hull of a ship. And the hull of a ship has significance in the African American community because many of our ancestors were transported via slave ships as part of the Middle Passage. And whenever we have groups of students come to the Black Cultural Center, we have them congregate there in front of the receptionist desk and talk about the hull of the ship and the significance of it, and let them know that if their African ancestors could have survived that horrific journey of the Middle Passage, that they too could survive the Purdue University experience.
Today, Purdue students enjoy the fruits of labor hard fought decades before. 41 years after Delta Sigma Theta, the first African-American sorority to arrive at Purdue, students like Erica Mills continue to find support.
Every August, and the very first Thursday of every school semester, there's what's called the Boiler Fest at the Black Cultural Center. And basically what it is an opportunity for all of the minority students at Purdue to come out and to get to know all the organizations that they can identify with, where they can find people who look like them and who are interested in things that they're interested in. So my freshman year, this was definitely the first time when I walked out and I saw everyone around me who pretty much looked like me, and a whole bunch of different organizations that I could join, where I could see these type of people every day. And to be on a campus like Purdue, I think that's really important. And so Boiler Fest definitely was like the stepping stone to help get me to where I am. So my freshman year, this was definitely the first time when I walked out and I saw everyone around me who pretty much looked like me, and a whole bunch of different organizations that I could join, where I could see these type of people every day. And to be on a campus like Purdue, I think that's really important. And so Boiler Fest definitely was like the stepping stone to help get me to where I am. I was interviewing for a job, and they asked, what university I came from, and I let them know that I was from Purdue University, and they got really excited, like Purdue, the Purdue University, and I was like, yeah, it's just Purdue. But for me, it was, an opportunity to see that outside of Purdue, people really do look at the university in a very good light, and that it's a wonderful university. And so it made me feel really good to know that my education was going to be from somewhere that, was looked upon well by the world.
Since Helen Bass Williams arrived in the 1960s, a tight-knit, informal, family-style faculty-student mentorship has been available to students at Purdue.
Minority engineering program here at Purdue University has affected me largely. I was born and raised in Gary, Indiana, ended up coming into Purdue University for computer engineering, and now I've landed a full-time job at Microsoft Corporation in Redmond, Washington. Anytime I want to see somebody of the same shade as me, I would go over to that side of campus, and I'll really be able to socialize with people of my same culture. It's always people there to help me. Miss Virginia Booth is there to guide me along at any time of the day that you feel like going in her office and just relieving stress, letting it all out. She'll listen to you, she'll give you advice, they'll send you in the right direction. Virginia Booth in the Minority Engineering Program, like, that's mama, that's my mother.
Minority engineering programs at Purdue, I would say that we have created a family kind of an environment for young people that come here, not just engineering students, but any student that might come into our offices for help. To be called mama is probably a reflection of that family feel, just as I would call Marion mom, and a lot of students saw Marion as the mom away from home, the one that kept you in check, even when your own mother didn't know what you were doing. Students see that in me as well. Outside of the fact that I fry a lot of chicken and I have them over to the house on the weekends, and you know, they can pretty much come to me for whatever situation might be going on in their lives. I keep a box of Kleenex in my office, and when students have an issue or they flunked the test or they got 100, we may rejoice and we may cry, depending on what the situation is. So I think young people need that sense of family, and the fact that they would call me mom is a reflection that we've established that at Purdue.
Be Black at Purdue, it's not where it should be, but it is better than where we were. So we've made some steps, but yet we still have some progress to make. So we've walked a long journey, but the journey is still there. And so I think what really helps is having people in place like myself who've gone through the journey at a different level, and a lot of people are coming back to Purdue to work for Purdue who were here on the other side. So we can see both sides of the coin and know how we can make this thing better for the students and the environment that they're going to face when they exit this place.
It's been over 100 years since David Robert Lewis first walked onto Purdue's campus. He must have imagined, as we do now in moments of isolation, that there is indeed a better day coming, and that the best days for Purdue are yet to come.
Hail, hail to
I am Reverend Dr. Nicholas Hood. I am Purdue.
I am Marion Williamson Blaylock. I am Purdue.
I am Reverend Eric Duke McCaskill, and I am Purdue.
I am Roger Blaylock. I am Purdue.
I am Tony Harris. I am Purdue.
I am Erica Elizabeth Mills. I am Purdue.
I'm Heather Parchment. I am Purdue.
I am Roland Parrish. I am Purdue. I'm Don Thompson. I am Purdue.
I am Liz Thompson. I am Purdue.
I am Taurus L. Richardson. I am Purdue.